Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. No one was more surprised than M. Brown McNally when he uncovered an earth-shattering family secret while looking into his ancestry. He shares the story in Devil Moon over Philadelphia, the other Philadelphia story. So you started the book at the Jersey Shore?
Yeah, we've had this house here in Connecticut like almost 30 years. What happened, Alice, I was down here, I guess it was in 2017, and I was trying to research my grandfather's father and his family. He never told me anything about it. And I found some startling information on Amazon about my great-grandfather. And I said, man, I got to write a book about this. I went on Ancestry, and with the help of a cousin, she said, well, how old was your grandfather, do you think, in 1900? I said, oh, maybe 60 years old, my great-grandfather. And of course, my grandfather, who I grew up knowing, he lived on the next street from me. And I always asked him, Grandpa, what did your father do? And he said, well, he was a grocer in Philadelphia. And I said, well, do you have any brothers and sisters? And he said, well, they're all gone now. That's all I ever knew. So anyway, I go on Ancestry, and I knew my great-grandfather's name was Peter David McNally. So I put in the 1900 census. Well, there he is, Peter D. McNally, grocer. Well, I'm looking at this page, and I don't see any of his, I don't see my grandfather listed as a son or any daughters or a wife. I just see the names of all these other men, and some of them are black, some of them are white, all different ages. And I said, what the heck is this? Where's he living, a boarding house or something? And so I scroll on down, and lo and behold, it's the 1900 census of the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. My great-grandfather was in prison. I said, what the heck? I said, how'd he get there? What did he do? So what I did, I subscribed to some newspaper archives where I could get any newspaper, any city, any date. So I bracketed the years from about 1850 to 1900, figuring if there must have been some sort of a trial or something. So I put in some keywords, the penitentiary, his name, a trial, and bang, there it was, October 15th, it was 1883. Front page of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And it says, father shoots favorite daughter in family grocery store. That's what I said. I said, holy smokes, what is this? How'd that happen? What did he do? Why did he do that? So I kept going more, and of course the newspaper, I just kept getting more and more information from subsequent newspapers, and found out what happened. The whole story was there. The trial was there. All the names and everything in the book are totally real. The trial's real. The murder actually happened, and it's an incredible story. So I figured, I have to write this book. So I researched my family's name, McNally, back as far as I could, and it went back as far as 1778, all the way over in Glasgow, Scotland. That's where the book starts.
Wow. That's that took a lot of time, I bet.
And I'll tell you, I think anybody who has an interest in their own family would enjoy this book, and it would probably inspire a lot of people to do a lot of their own family research. I mean, this thing was a skeleton in the closet for 126 years, Alice.
Nobody like your dad didn't know about it?
I actually believe that my grandmother, in other words, my grandmother, when she married my grandfather knew what happened, but I don't think he told her. I mean, can you imagine him saying, Edna, I'd like you to marry me, and by the way, my father shot my sister? I don't think so.
Well, I
So
mean,
I don't think she knew. I don't think my father knew. I don't think any of the family knew this until I found out.
well, I only have one question. Is there any way it was justified?
Well, you have to read the book.
I know. I realize
uh,
that.
all I can tell you is there's a big struggle when my family left Ireland. Well, they left Scotland because of religious persecution. Two very brave young souls took a boat and they went from Glasgow to Dublin. From Dublin, they migrated out into the countryside of Ireland. They started raising the McNally family there. They had kids. They were farmers. And then all of a sudden in the late 1840s, the potato famine hit.
Right.
Well, 12 million Irishmen died. That many, 12 million. And they were smart enough to leave Ireland and immigrate to America. They went to New York first. They were there for 10 years, had a very hard time. Irish were not respected in New York. Matter of fact, there'd be signs up, help wanted, Irish need not apply.
Right. Yep.
And one of the sons went down to Philadelphia, and he loved it down there, the city of brotherly love, and he told his mother and father, come on down, bring everybody down. So they went down to Philadelphia, and that's where my great-grandfather started in the grocery business. And the book will tell the whole story, but he had a lot of difficult times doing it. He was a farmer. He wasn't a businessman. He didn't understand all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of great history in there about Philly. Anybody who's lived there or around there would recognize a lot of the landmarks and a lot of the things that happened. And since the book really covered from late 1700s to 1910 when my great-grandfather died. So what I've done throughout the book, I've put in some historical markers. For instance, when Abraham Lincoln was elected, when the Civil War started. So it gives you a sense of where my family was when various things were happening in history.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I agree with you. I mean, every family's got a story, and it could be as intriguing as yours, or it could be just something you would never expect, know?
Well, I'll tell you, it took a long time. It took, I guess close to 5 years to get this done. I mean, it's not a big book. It's only a couple hundred pages. But when I wrote it, I figured, let me write just enough to tell the story. I don't want to put in a lot of useless filler. So that's how the book got to be as long as it is. I put down what I thought was necessary, but the research was really interesting. The closer I got to present day, the better the research got, when I could get into things like newspaper articles and things like that. The old history, say going back to Scotland and Ireland, was difficult. For instance, the name McNally in Scott means son of poor man. Well, how many poor men were there? They were all over the place.
Right.
My family was just some of them. And
how did you figure out who was who? Because McNally is a very common Irish name, wouldn't you say?
Well, it is, but I was able to go back through the birth certificates and through things like not just Ancestry, but there's several other websites. There's one, Irish Heritage and Scottish Heritage, and I was able to link, the names of the mothers and fathers to the children and go back in history as far as Scotland. But once I got there with the name McNally, there were just too many McNallys. the records weren't as good.
Right.
But I'm absolutely sure that all the people in this book are real people. They're real names. The dates that they were born are within a year of each other, because people really didn't celebrate birthdays back then.
Right.
The big deal was getting baptized, and you could get baptized anywhere from being a week old till 10 years old. So the baptismal records were, plus or minus a few years. And in the research, I just tried to use the best information I could. So I had real people, real dates, when they were born, when they died. I had birth certificates or baptismal certificates. So I knew even who witnessed the baptism, the names of their friends and where it was, what church it was done in, when people died, death certificates, what they died from. And the death certificate tells you a lot of things: the color of the person's hair, the color of their eyes, how tall they were, how much they weighed. And then I had to develop a character with these people, try to sort of guess how they acted. And a lot of that I did by what their professions were. For instance, my great-grandfather, besides being a farmer, when they moved from the farmland back over to Dublin right before they came to New York City, he worked in a tannery. Well, that was rotten, stinking work, So you can imagine how people, and the amount of money they made was nothing, a couple shillings a week, enough to buy a few loaves of bread. So all the kids had to work. They did go to Catholic schools, like a church school, but once you were 14, that was it. There's no extra school, no high school kind of thing.
No,
It was,
you went to work.
You're going out to work.
Right.
And that, I can tell you, that continued all the way up to my father.
Huh.
My grandfather was a printer, Peter Joseph. In the book, they call him PJ. That was his nickname. Well, PJ worked at this printing company in Philadelphia, Charles Elliott and Son, which was a real printing company. He went there when he was 14 years old. And when my father was 14, my father lived in Philadelphia with PJ, and he went to high school one day, and PJ said, "Joe, you're coming to work with me." My father worked at Elliott and Son until he was 63 years old.
That's amazing.
So
that's amazing.
So he did come from a poor family.
Now, is it important for you to sell this book?
That's not the purpose I wrote it. I think it's a great book. I mean, I'm a pretty avid reader, and when I finished it, I really didn't read the entire book until I finished it. It was done, and all the editing was done, and I think it reads very well. But I'm not really trying to make money. I mean, if I can cover my publishing costs, that'd be great.
So you're not gonna like go crazy trying to sell it.
I don't think so, unless somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, you really got something here. We'd like to do something with it." Sure, then I would. I live on an island in South Carolina. It's called Keilholtz Island, an old Indian name, but it's right near Beaufort, South Carolina.
Okay.
And in Beaufort, it's a very artsy town, and we have some authors there. Pat Conroy,
yep.
The author,
yep.
He lived in Beaufort. Matter of fact, we lived a couple houses away from him when he was alive. I got to know him a little bit. But there's a Pat Conroy literary. It's like a library kind of thing, and they new authors can go there and introduce their books. So I think I'll probably do that locally.
There you go.
And also, we have a branch of University of South Carolina in Beaufort, and I've been at their library many times and talked to their librarian. I told him I'd like to just give a couple copies of the book to the library, and if any of the classes were interested in having me do a presentation, I'd do that.
Yeah, you sound like you do presentations very well. You're an engineer, right? You graduated from Drexel?
Yeah. And I studied structural engineering for 9 years. I graduated from night school in 1966.
Good for you. I bet that worked out for you.
Yeah, it did. Ended up, I worked for a large land developer up in northern New Jersey, Hartz Mountain Industries. I was their chief engineer and in charge of their construction for 20 years. Then I opened my own consulting firm for another 20 years. So I really had a good ride. And I've always liked to write. And I wrote a lot of memoirs, short stories, poems, things like that. I've had some stuff published in small local papers and so forth. But this is really my first effort at a book. And it was quite challenging, I must say.
Well, congratulations. Good for you.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'll tell you, it was a real learning experience, though, the whole publishing business and procedure of doing it. It was grueling.
Grueling? Would you ever write another one?
Well, actually, I have, while this book was going through editing, I mean, the editing procedure is a lot of back and forth with the publisher.
Yep.
And suggestions, and either take it or you don't, going through and making corrections. And while all this was going, every time I submit it back, it would take 4 weeks for a response to come. And so during the 4 weeks, well, I would write. What else? So as a result, I have like 5 other books in the hopper, all at various stages of completion. And this particular book that we're talking about today, Devil Moon over Philadelphia, the idea I got of that title was my great-grandfather was a very troubled man. You'll see in the story if you read the book. He had a lot of problems. And back in those days, when somebody had any kind of a mental illness, they were referred to as lunatics.
Right. And
they had places like insane asylums. And so I did a lot of research on lunatics and insane asylums. And it turns out that statistically, when there's a full moon, there's a lot more sort of crazy things happen.
Would you please tell my family that? I've been telling them that for years. It's a full moon. Leave me alone.
It's about, statistics show there's about a 1% jump in homicides and people entering psychiatric wards, things like that. So in the book, you'll see where my grandfather's very troubled, and every once in a while he looks up at this full moon and it really gives him the heebie-jeebies, and he makes him feel strange. And, the fact of the matter was he was losing his mind. Oh. He was slowly going crazy, not just from the problems in his business. Early in his life, he had to go work in the tannery with his father. And of course, they're sniffing in all these caustic gases and chemicals are around them. And that started affecting his brain, too.
Wow. So
it's sort of a tragic story. It's really a tragic story about a guy who was trying so hard to have a good family and he's slowly going mad.
Oh, wow. You stumbled on a good one. I got to hand it to you. Not everybody gets their hands on a story this good.
Well, I think my wife read it, and she's an avid reader. She's in a book club and all that. And she said, Michael, this thing should be a series on Netflix.
I was just going to say that.
Remember I said my grandfather said they're all gone now? Oh, he never told me about his brothers and sisters. He was one of 10. There were 10 of them. And when he told me that, there were many of them still alive. But they just all sort of went their own way and never kept in touch. My wife's an avid reader, and she belongs to a book club, and she read the book, and a couple other people in the book club read it too. And my wife said, Michael, she said, this book is great. I've read a lot of stuff that's not as good as this. And she said, it's so good, it should be a Netflix series because it's so descriptive.
Yeah, you can just see.
And it has all these characters in it, many characters, and taking place in Philadelphia. There's a lot of recognizable places in history there.
Amazing, Michael. Good for you. You've inspired me, Michael. You've inspired me.
I hope you get a copy of my book and read it.
I will.
Okay. Hey, thanks a
You have a
lot.
great day.
Okay, you too.
Okay, bye
Bye.
bye. Next up, a couple of books written during the pandemic. And I'm telling you, we have a growing list of them, including The Best Dad by Samantha Sanders-Torri.
So I had my second baby right out of nursing school, right whenever COVID really started. And I was like losing a lot of patients from COVID, and I was a cardiac nurse. And the only thing that really pulled me out of like, I ended up going into like kind of like a mild postpartum depression where I was just like anxious about losing my baby. And I was also very concerned about my older son as well. And so I actually started writing children's books for them, that and it just really helped me get out of like my funk and give something back to them that we could like do together. And it ended up being something that my family really loved, and people started asking me to write books for like their kids. And so I started doing that. I ended up writing like over 20 of them. And then my mom came to me one day and she said that, you know, she wanted to help me publish one of them. And so here we are.
Had you ever written before this?
No, my family's very artistic. They're all musicians, and they all sketch and paint and do stuff like that. They're all very creative. And so I've always like sketched, but I've never really wrote like a book until this.
Amazing. You know, if COVID was good for one thing, it was bringing people to writing. So many people
Yeah.
found comfort through writing, either
Yeah.
writing their first book or keeping a journal or sorting through thoughts they hadn't had a chance to pay attention to. And I often joke I'm going to do a show just with COVID writers, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
what's your book about?
So the book is about my kid's dad. He builds these trucks, and they're called rock crawlers, and he goes into the woods and goes camping with all of us go. And the trucks that he builds are really like put to the test, and they rock crawl over these huge boulders. And my kids have learned a lot about building these trucks and how to drive them, and it's something that every summer where we live, we always go to the main trail that we go to is the McKinney Rubicon Trail. And it's beautiful. It's got wildflowers and all of these different animals and just all of these adventurous things for them to do. And there's swimming, but mainly there's rock crawling. And it's something that they're able to really bond over. And so it was whenever I started like looking for books that were towards rock crawling, there's not really a lot of them. And so like writing this book, it's basically a book about their adventures, like my son's adventures with their dad, and just going to the McKinney Rubicon Trail and going rock crawling, and kind of like it's fun, but they really rely on their dad to like get through the harder obstacles, and he teaches them a lot and just helps them learn how to get better at it.
Well, the name of your book is The Best Dad. So what is the plot, I guess, or what is the story specific to this book? Do they, encounter a difficult situation, or do they have to overcome something? Do they learn something in particular?
Yeah, it's just a really challenging sport. And they have, like, the dad is actually a rock crawler, and the little trucks, or my sons, they're also rock crawlers. And so they all go to the trail, and there's a huge water crossing, and they're really worried about it. And so he helps them get across it. He helps them build up their truck to be stronger. He teaches them things about themselves and just helps them to be better little buggies.
That's so funny. So the characters are the trucks.
Yes.
Oh, that's so sweet. Are the characters the trucks in every book? You said you've written like 20?
No. It's all different. It's all different things. I've written, every book has a different story. So I have one of my friends that I worked with during COVID. She was a nurse, and she actually had her baby 2 weeks before I had my baby, and her baby ended up passing away of SIDS.
Oh.
And she had a really hard time explaining to her son, who was also the same age as my son, basically like, why did his little sister pass away after, she passed away at 3 months old. So they had plenty of time to get very close to her. And I ended up writing a book for him, just that, she was this little angel that God only allowed to come down for a short amount of time because she just craved being with this family that she had watched over. And he told her that she could go down, but she had to come back because he needed her in heaven too. And so she was able to go and spend a few months with this family, but that she's always with them, and he can see his sister and the rainbows and the butterflies and the flowers and stuff like that, because she wanted to come back to see him in the things that he loved the most. And, so like stuff like that, I've written books just about like trying to help my older son be a good big brother to his little brother, and just all kinds of things, just whatever comes to my mind.
Are you able to read your books to other kids?
Yeah, I've done a lot of books for kids that have like gone through things, and I haven't really like read to like a lot of kids. It's mainly like I'll write a book for a specific group of kids. But the rock crawling community actually has a lot of kids involved in it, and there's not a lot of children's books that are specifically towards rock crawling. So there's a lot of companies that they sell like kids clothing for rock crawling, and also they sell like rock crawling parts and stuff like that, but they don't actually sell any books. And so I've reached out to a couple of them just to see if maybe they would be interested, and they want to see the book. And then I've got like some local shops where I'm at that want to sell it.
That's a great idea, to reach out to these companies that are specific. It's a specific audience, but it goes beyond that specific audience, because you're talking about, little boys who love this kind of stuff.
Yes,
and probably girls too,
Yes. Yeah. I would like to see how this one goes. I do really enjoy writing them. This is my first time doing anything like this, so I don't really know what I'm doing. I know that there is definitely a little bit of a margin just to see like which way it can go, but it's definitely something that I would like to continue to pursue, and also continue to reach out to like those populations of kids that, they do go through little traumas that people don't really help them through unless it's like a family helping them through it, like my friend that lost her baby. And
right.
It would be nice just to be able to reach out to those kids and just let them know, like, that they're not alone. Unfortunately, like, these things happen, and and just try to give them a different perspective as well.
Sam, your heart is in the right place. I'll tell you that.
I'm trying.
It really is. Where are you, in California?
I'm in California. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I'm in a super small town in California. We're a little north of Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
So in the mountains, but the town that I live in, we don't have a stoplight. We don't have a gas station. We don't have nothing. But it's really given my kids a really wonderful place to grow up. They've kind of grown up away from the hustle and bustle of the city, as I'm sure you're used to in New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. Did you go back to nursing?
Yes, I still am nursing. I'm in a smaller hospital now. These patients, where I used to work, I was a cardiac nurse, and I would have 5 to 6 patients, and I was night shift, so it was a little slower, but I never really got to know my patients. And that was the whole reason I went into nursing, is I wanted to get to know these people that I was caring for and know their families. And I ended up transferring to a really small hospital close to where I live. There's about 9 hospital beds in it, and that's about it. But I have gotten so close with my patients and their families, and just been able to like really sit with them and talk with them and let them feel like I was somebody that they can trust. And, because you go to the hospital and you're like letting a stranger treat you with sometimes really scary medications for really scary problems. And I think, whenever people can actually just get to know who their nurse is, and, then the family knows who they're talking to, and there's like a sense of community there, that people, they do better and they feel better and they feel more comfortable there. So it makes me feel better to be involved like that.
Maybe you'll write about that someday.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be.
Listen, I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you.
T.E. Keilholtz is also a member of the COVID Writing Club. It was during the lockdown that he was inspired to write a Western entitled Somewhere.
I read a library. And at the beginning of COVID, my daughter bought me a bunch of books to read because we're going to be cooped up. And I was reading one day, and I thought to myself, I can write this good. And so and I thought that, and I just decided to write a book. And I don't know if you want to call it boredom, being, isolated from everybody. I decided to do something. So I wrote Somewhere, the first book.
Oh, so this is just the first. Now, it looks to me like it's historical fiction.
It is.
Did you have to do a lot of
historical.
research?
Not a whole lot of research. I'm versed pretty well in the Civil War. I was part of a historical reenactment unit as Union cavalry, and I've always been interested as from childhood. And also from childhood, I grew up on a farm around horses and cattle and all that thing. Fortunately, I have relatives that live out in Wyoming. So, I guess I didn't do a whole lot. Like, I would check things as I write.
Right.
As I'm writing, I'm thinking, does that, like words, that word exist?
Right.
And things like that. I would just fact check myself on certain things, but for the most part, I didn't do a lot of research for book one.
Okay.
And I've traveled back and forth from Pennsylvania to Cody, Wyoming, so many times and every time I do it, I think to myself, man, how did the people back then do it? I mean, it is a long trip in a car.
I know.
So,
and think about it. They went all the way to California. They went across Death. Have you ever been to Death Valley? You're like, how did they ever get across Death Valley? My God.
When you see I know.
It's
Tell
like,
me.
what were these people made of? In horses and wagons and buggies and food and it must have been impossible to keep things, from going bad. And it's crazy what they went through. So,
Absolutely.
So I love your name, Jeremiah Bradley O'Shea.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that name come from? That's your main character, I'm assuming.
J.B. O'Shea, I just made him up. I wanted him to be an ex-cavalry soldier, and riding in the 3rd Pennsylvania Cavalry Unit, which I put him in because that was the unit that that I rode with in this historical reenactment unit. Some Irish boys, or a lot of Irish boys, so coming out of Pennsylvania. So that's why I just picked him out. Just a name.
Right.
And he is my main character.
Yeah. So tell me about this guy. What makes him want to head west from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is a beautiful place?
Yes. He lived through the Civil War, was wounded right at the end. But before the Civil War started, in about 1858, his brother and his brother's new wife, Bride, left Lancaster to head west. Okay. His brother could kind of read the tea leaves, his older brother, that things weren't going to be well in the east. And he wanted to go west. So Jeremiah's driving force during the battle, during the war, the Civil War, was that when it was over, that's what he wanted to do. He was going to go west to be with his brother and his brother's family. And that was a lot of times what kept him alive during the war.
Was that hope?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm sure he encounters some characters along the way.
Oh, Yes. He did it. He started his journey off by himself, thinking, hoping it would be more therapeutic because of the person that he had become during the Civil War. And he knew it wasn't a really nice person, but he encounters many people along the way. And one in particular, he takes under his wing, a young boy that's a stowaway on a train, and he kind of takes him in, and they're going to become partners when they finally get to where they're going, which is somewhere.
We don't know where. We don't know where they're going to end up.
He didn't know exactly where his brother's ranch was in the Wyoming territories. And when people would talk to him, he said, well, where are you going? And he says, I'm somewhere out in the Wyoming territory, somewhere out west. He couldn't pinpoint it, so he would refer to it as somewhere.
And you know how big Wyoming is. It's
huge.
Yeah,
I've been there. You got to cross the Bighorn Mountains before you get to the Rocky Mountains.
So we follow him roaming around Wyoming looking for his brother?
No. As he goes, I mean, his brother sent him a map. Okay. So he's following this map, but he's still, in his mind, he's still not sure because all of this is new. Everything he sees, everything does, the Badlands. Oh. When he sees the Badlands and the Black Hills for the first time, he's like, what the hell is this? Right. And he meets and encounters different people, makes some friends, makes some enemies, and that's the way the story goes.
There's got to be a shootout.
There's more than one, let's say, because of just the way things happen. And I mean, when the book first picks up, he's on the train, and he starts on the train, of course, and he meets this young lady. Of course, she's from the South, he's from the North, and he puts together that her last name is Johnston, and is she related to the General Joe Johnston of the South? Anyhow, they kind of hit it off, and then she just gets off the train. She basically disappears, but there's people following her, so that's the first kind of encounter. But then along the way, he meets. There's always highwaymen, and of course you have your occasional Indians. But the book goes in depth, explaining that there's different Indians, that you can't judge basically one Indian by another Indian. They're very different cultures, very different beliefs. Some he befriends, some he lives with. They live with an Indian family for almost a month because one of his travel buddies got hurt, and these Indians, the Sioux Indians, he lives with them. They live with them until he gets better. But he also realizes the Sioux have enemy, right? And you learn that just because your skin may be a particular color, you may not be with that particular group of people. Right. So you learn all these things.
Now, is there a cliffhanger at the end of this book?
Yes, there is. At the end of the book, towards the end of the book, the guy, his name's Calvin, and he's the boy he picks up on the train. And from that point, when they get off the train, all the way west, they're talking about. He said, you'll be my partner. He really liked this kid, and they talked about how they were going to build the ranch. And what they were going to do, what they want to do. And in the end, they are one day away from his brother's ranch to getting to where he has to go. And they encounter a group of hostile Indians, and Calvin, along with another man he met, was killed. And Calvin dies. He's holding Calvin in his arms, and Calvin's dying. Oh. And he promises Calvin, he said, you will always be my partner. And he named his ranch the Rocking Sea Ranch when because of Calvin. Oh. And the other thing is the people that have read the book so far, the first girl in the book, he met, who disappears, they're really pissed off that I haven't brought her back yet, and I don't know if I'm gonna. I'm starting book 5.
You're cracking me up because when you said somebody's following her, I was like, oh, okay, what happens to her? So that's not a thread you really picked up on again?
I haven't come back to her yet.
Oh, and you're on book 5?
Yes.
Wow, you are something else.
Yeah, I am on book 5.
And your readers are angry. They are angry.
Well, everybody that has read book 1, they're like, what happened? You know, what happened to Addie, and how could you dare kill Calvin off in the end? How could you do that? Because I mean, you know, a couple of people said I had to put the book down. I started to cry. I said, let me tell you something. When I wrote that chapter, when I wrote his death, I got emotional, and I'm the author. I'm making this up, and I'm like, wait, you know, it's just that type of scene where his best friend in the world and this guy that he had planned to, you know, live the rest of his life, you know, working together with, is dead. And that's how quick thing changes.
So you're hooked up with I love these groups that do the Civil War reenactments.
Well, they do them all the time. I mean, around here, living close to Gettysburg, it's the 4th of July and things like that.
4th of July?
Right.
Okay.
They're not nearly like they used to be back when I was doing it. I mean, I would help make the movie Gettysburg, which they made in Gettysburg, which when it began, it was called Killer Angels. I was part of the 100 cavalry people that made that movie.
Wow.
They had 100 of us from the country, you know, in the country that came to Gettysburg to make that movie. So I was part of that, and I got to work with some very interesting people.
I bet.
Sam Elliott being one of them.
Yeah, I heard he's an interesting guy. Okay, I would think that would be a book that you would find out in Gettysburg at one of their bookshops.
Oh yeah, and I have some signings, book signings lined up that I'm going to do, and things like that. Created my own, you know, my webpage and all that.
Good for you. Good for you. I think that's the best way to go. Especially a book like this, because I can imagine you standing there, and people have all kinds of questions, not just about your book, but with your background. And, you know, just knowing as much as you do about the Civil War, you'd be, fascinating for people to come and listen to. Good for you.
So that's what I talk about. And of course, growing up with my grandfather, who would go west. He was one of the biggest buyers for SK Meats out of Baltimore, and he would go west and he would buy trainloads of cattle and bring them back to Baltimore. So as a little kid, I would ride ponies. I remember pushing cattle from the farm in Mater Station down to Rocky Ridge, where they would load them up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they would meet their fate.
So that's why I wrote somewhere and used and in those times, because I can relate to it, and I know a little bit about everything that's going on.
You can draw on all those experiences. Good for you.
Yeah.
So when's book 2 coming out?
Let's see how book 1 goes.
All right. All right.
And book 2 could come out tomorrow if I let it.
Okay.
These plans I have, I joined the Western Writers Association, and I'm headed out to their convention in Rapid City, South Dakota, and make contacts there. But I feel like my best way of advertising and promoting the book is on the web. I mean, can reach a lot of people that way.
Yeah, you can. And you reach people, you can find people that will be interested in this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, believe me, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already have.
Good for you. I'm going to have you talk to our other writers. I interview so many writers who just don't know where to begin. And Paige does. Like, they send stuff out and they do what they do, but nobody's going to promote that book like you are. No, I don't care what anybody says. You got to get behind it. You got to get out there. You got to talk about it, and you have to find your audience. Right. And it sounds like you're right on top of that.
Believe me, Alice, I'm trying. And, one of the things I've done is increase my Facebook friends, because when I tie all that in, over the past couple of months, I've increased my Facebook friends from I was let's say 600, and now I'm over 3,000, and So that's part of my plan, to just reach as many people as I can to promote it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Page is only going to do so much. So we'll see.
Yeah.
The ball's still up in the air for them. But, that's why I'm talking to you, though.
All right. All right. Well, I promise you I will put this out there and we'll take it from there. And you will get a copy of it so you could post this online too.
I appreciate that.
You got it.
I really do.
All right. You have a great day.
Thank you, Alice.
All right. You take care. For M.J. Pittman, writing became a hobby about 8 years ago, then a passion, and then a dream inspired him to write Shades of Destiny Revelations.
The first Marvel Iron Man came out, right?
Right.
And everyone was into superheroes. And I was thinking to myself, I grew up reading all the comics and everything, but I never saw too many superhero novels. And so I had this idea, and I started writing the story, and it wasn't well received with my friends because, in all honesty, it was garbage. But I had forgot about it. And I think I did that like way back when, like I said, Iron Man came out. And then was sitting on my laptop one day cleaning it out. I was actually getting it ready for a friend to use, and I came across it. And I started reading, and I'm like, wow, this is terrible. And I was like, okay. And so but I saved it for some reason. I saved there were some parts of it that were okay. And I guess my brain just kept unconsciously working it over. Then one night I had this very, very vivid dream that was the world of Shades of Destiny. And I woke up and I was obsessed. I just kept writing what I saw, like describing things and the characters and the world, and I just kind of just kept writing, and it literally just from there, like I said, it just was like a snowball rolling downhill. Just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the concept changed over time because it was originally going to be first person, and then it's not now. but yeah, it went from 4 books to a possible 7-book series, and yeah,
7 books. That's a lot of books. All right. So what's the story?
And it's nuts and bolts. It's a story about friendship framed in a post-apocalyptic world. The main characters, some of them are new friends forged by the apocalypse. Some of them are old friends who had heard about this mythical realms. And these realms kind of ran the world, so to speak. They kind of make up the world. And as they kind of come of age, they realize that they're part of these realms more than they realized, and they discover they have abilities that can help them and aid them. But then they find out, there's some more sinister things in the world, and unfortunately, friends who were best friends, they find out were on the different sides of the world, and different sides of concepts, and so they have their struggle with their friendship through this post-apocalyptic world and trying to save everything. But at the same time, there's always that evil element in the background working against them.
So this is Michael, Shane, and Damian.
Correct.
Trying to work through this post-apocalyptic world, but they all have different ideas as to how they should proceed.
Yes.
So are they able to maintain their friendship?
Not really. So the beauty of the story is there's these in the story there's the talk of these 5 realms, and 2 of them in the history of the lore are destroyed. There's only these 3 realms, and they find out that they're pretty much the leaders or the front people for these 3 realms. Michael and Shane actually meet post-apocalypse, and Damian and Michael were best friends before the apocalypse, but kind of lose their way.
Okay.
I do lay the foundation for all 7 books in the one book. Like there's unfortunately it does end probably leaving people wanting a little more, but there was too much to tell in one book.
Okay.
And I wanted to keep it with a young adult genre. I wanted this to be like an enjoyable read, but that wasn't those epic fantasies where, my gosh, I've been trying to read this book for 2 years and I can never seem to quite get through it because something always block, comes up.
Right.
I want people to be able to, if they go on vacation, they could read it in 4 days if they wanted to, or 3 days.
Okay. Are there lessons learned here?
Oh, yes. There's a story about discovery and friendship, and there's a lot of lessons. Not everything is what it seems.
Okay.
I think the best thing is it comes from some life experiences where often the lines between good and evil are more blurred than they are black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know what someone's intentions are. And so someone could have the best intentions and still do the wrong things. And then people label them as evil. Or vice versa. Someone could be doing evil things but have really good intentions and do the ends justify the means.
Right.
You never know. And so those are the lessons this group learns along the way, along with their self-discovery. Some friendships are tested, some are forged, some are, but what they find is that it's a strength in community.
Okay. All right. I like that. There's something to hang on to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. How are you telling people about this?
I'm using social media. I'm going to be hitting the ground running with going to the local bookstores, hoping to go to some book conventions.
There you go.
Using my friend network as well, like a lot of friends and family. I have friends and family all over the country, actually all over the world, really. I have some friends in Germany. I have some friends in Japan. When I originally was bringing this process along, I was doing a lot of Facebook kind of social media updates. And a lot of interest actually came from places I didn't know. So it's really interesting. So I have a small little following kind of in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
In the Philippines. And so that was interesting to me. That was kind of organic. I didn't target there, but they seem to like my posts and follow my page, and hopefully they've been purchasing my book.
See, I find that really interesting because some people have a very difficult time putting their stuff out on social media, but you just don't know where you will hit on, your post-apocalyptic target audience, right? People that are into this genre, and that's exactly who you're looking for, and you didn't even try, and you hit them.
Yeah, and so like I said, I've been just honestly putting it out there. Some paid ads, some not, obviously, and some things grew organically. I have a website, shadesofdestiny.com.
Okay.
That kind of outlines the book and how to purchase it, and also has a little more behind the scenes, some pictures and places that inspired some of the scenes.
Good. So you're on your way.
I'm getting there.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you somewhere between book 2 and book 7. How's that?
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton-Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.